Welcome to the Holistic Therapy Interviews. Today I'm joined by Steve Kippax from Woodbridge. Welcome, Steve.
Hi.
And Steve is going to be speaking to us about Chinese herbs, among other things, but his main subject will be Chinese herbs. And I'm Lucy, holistic flow coach and mentor, helping you to reach your peak performance in your life. And so I'd like to first of all introduce Steve to you. We actually worked together many, many years ago at a natural health centre in London. And Steve is a Western trained medical herbalist and a past president of the National Institute of Medical Herbalists. He's a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, Chinese herbalist, acupuncturist, diet therapy, Tui Na, massage, and Qigong. He was listed as one of the top 20 health gurus in the country by the Daily Telegraph. He has a master's degree in herbal medicine, and his first book, Health in Theory and Practice, Circling the Square, was printed in 2019. So with that, I'd love to hand over to you, Steve, to share your story and all about Chinese herbs and how did that all happen?
Thank you very much, Lucy, for inviting me on. So, whilst being born up in Yorkshire, I was actually brought up in Ipswich in Suffolk. And so it was the 1970s and I wanted to buy an electric guitar. So therefore, the option was either to get a paper round or to dig the garden. So I started digging the garden when I was about 13. By the time I was about 17, school and I decided that we didn't really see eye to eye very well. So I therefore left. And my mother was a homeopath and my father was a Baptist minister. And so at the tender age of 17, my parents said to me, would you like to go to college to be a herbalist? I thought, well, it's got to be better than working in an insurance office, which is what I had previously been doing. So in 1980, I went down to the School of Herbal Medicine in Tunbridge Wells, where I spent the next 4 to 5 years of my life learning Western herbal medicine, which was primarily Western biomedicine, so anatomy, physiology, pathology, biochemistry, etc., with herbs on top. So I therefore joined the National Institute of Medical Herbalists, which is the oldest body of practicing herbalists in the Western world, being formed, I believe, in 1862, 1865, I need to check that, and started to practice. So this means I've been practicing for 39 years now. My practice has always been in London and in Suffolk. I started off working in Archway at the Whole Earth Exchange. I then moved to the Hale Clinic in the late 1980s, which was about the time I started becoming interested in Chinese herbal medicine, and then worked for 10 years at the South London Natural Health Centre with Lucy. And then in 2020, I moved onto something slightly different. So by 1988, 1989, I've been practicing for 2 or 3 years and was feeling, it wasn't going too badly. I was working with my mother, so I had a fairly large number of patients from virtually day one. I was seeing probably at least 30 patients a week, virtually from qualification.
Fantastic.
Using some homeopathy, which I'd osmotically learned from her, and the Western herbs that I'd learned from the course that I had attended. Then I had a rather challenging patient, which made me feel inadequate. Not a sensation I like to feel. And so very conveniently and serendipitously, there was a flyer on the sideboard with an introduction to Chinese herbal medicine, which I duly attended, and I loved it.
Isn't it interesting how that happens? Something just shows up when it's the right time, right?
Well, it's alchemy. It's turning lead into gold. On one level, I presume it's been probably the worst experience I'd ever had, certainly in my practicing life, turned into the beginning of this journey, which, as the Chinese say, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one small step. I therefore enrolled at the School of Chinese Herbal Medicine, which was held monthly in central London, and completed that by about 1991, and then went to Guangzhou in southern China. So in China, traditional Chinese medicine is a state-sponsored part of their health provision for their citizens, which means that if you are a Chinese citizen, you can access either Western medicine or traditional Chinese medicine as you choose, and the state provides. The last figures that I saw, which were for about 2017, showed that approximately 33% of all medical consultations and interventions were for TCM. So that equates to about 480 million visits per annum for traditional Chinese medicine. In China, they have traditional Chinese medicine hospitals where the people can access acupuncture, herbal medicine, etc.,
That's
etc.
fantastic. Wow. So how
Yeah.
long were you actually in China for, Steve?
Well, I've actually been 4 times. So the first time was 1992, working in the herbal medicine department. So you probably see between 25 to 50 people 5 days a week. Now,
Wow.
the way you diagnose is you look, you hear, you ask, and you feel. So you look at the person, you look particularly at their tongue, you ask questions, you hear the answers, and you feel the pulse. Now, obviously, you can get manuals of tongue diagnosis, which have pictures of tongues in, which is extremely helpful. However, you can't get a manual of feeling someone's pulse. Obviously, having a month in China, seeing that number of patients every 5 days a week for a month means that you can start to feel the difference between a wiry pulse or a slippery pulse or a choppy pulse or a floating pulse or a deep pulse, etc., etc. Traditional Chinese medicine is a theoretical subject. It explains the human condition in phraseology and terminology and a different paradigm to Western medicine or Ayurvedic medicine or humoral medicine, which are all different systems of medicine that have been used over the past 2 or 3 millennia. So with traditional Chinese medicine, the source textbook is called the Yellow Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine, which was compiled 100 BCE. Since then, traditional Chinese medicine has been used in a fairly recognizable format, and it's not really a million miles away from how we practice it today, because in reality, the human condition hasn't really changed much in 2,000 years. At the beginning of the Yellow Emperor's Canon, the first page is the Yellow Emperor asking his physician, he goes, in the olden days, now bearing in mind this book was compiled 100 BC, so he goes, in the olden days, people could live to be 100. Now they struggle to get to be 50. What's that all about then? So Chibo goes, well, in the olden days, people lived in harmony with Tao. They weren't working too hard. They weren't careless with their sexual energy. They ate sensibly. They practiced their Tai Chi and their Qigong. They moved in harmony with the flow of the seasons, and therefore they could manage to achieve that kind of age. Nowadays, people drink too much alcohol, they don't live sensibly, they're careless with their sexual energy, they eat rubbish food, they don't do any exercise, they don't do their breathing techniques, and thus they die when they're 50. If you take 2,000 years away from the middle, not a lot has really changed.
No, it hasn't, has it? I was thinking the same thing.
Exactly. Traditional Chinese medicine is a theoretical structure which underpins Chinese herbal medicine, acupuncture, diet therapy, Hui-Na, massage, and Qigong, which are the 5 practical ways that traditional Chinese medicine is used to affect change. So as we're talking about Chinese herbal medicine, particularly today, in the hospital that I went to in Guangzhou, they treated about 750,000 people a year in the outpatients department, and they had about 740 inpatient beds where they were given herbal medicine.
That's amazing.
Well, it was, yeah. And therefore, they gave the people herbal medicine. If people wanted Western medicine, then in China, which is something that we could certainly learn from in this country, all doctors are taught both systems of medicine. However, there was one day when I went into the hospital and one of my teachers looked a bit down at the mouth. I said, what's up? He goes, well, unfortunately, my daughter's dropped a grade, so she didn't get straight A, so she has to be a Western doctor, not a Chinese medicine doctor. So to be a Chinese medicine doctor in the 90s, you had to get straight A's. If you drop a grade, you can only be a Western medicine doctor.
Wow. Okay, interesting. And it's all sounding very preventative, with the methods that they use. Were you finding that people were coming in more to prevent things, or was it when they got ill that they came in?
No. The hospital in China was primarily for people who are sick.
Yeah.
So, they had a respiratory department, they had cardiac department, they had gynecology, they had gastroenterology, etc., etc. So they had different departments, as we do in Western medicine, medical setting. Indeed, prevention is much better than cure. And indeed, leading a sensible lifestyle. So it is important about all those kind of things. So with traditional Chinese medicine and Chinese herbal medicine, you learn the individual herbs first, which would be like learning syntax, and then you learn formulas. So with traditional Chinese medicine, they have diagnoses such as things like kidney yin deficiency or liver qi stagnation or wind heat. For these traditional diagnoses, there are traditional formulas which are specifically for those diagnoses. So therefore, if you can diagnose, there is every probability that there will be a traditional formula which will have been used for anything up to 2,000 years continuously, which will provide you with the solution. Now, when you learn Chinese herbal medicine, you learn not only what herbs are in the formulas, but what the herbs actually are doing inside the formulas. You modify the formula as necessary as the person manifests their symptom picture.
So very much personalizing what you're giving to your patients, right? Your clients.
Yeah, interestingly, there was a fairly renowned trial done in Australia by Ben Suson on irritable bowel syndrome with Chinese medicine. I think they had a placebo group, they had an individualized group, and they had a formula group. Now, interestingly, for the first 6 or 8 or 10 weeks, the formula group did actually slightly better than the individualized group. In the weeks and months after that, the individualized group did better than the formula group. They both did extremely much better than the placebo group.
The placebo. Wow.
But that's easily findable. It's a very good piece of research.
Yeah, we need to put that in. Remind me to put that in the description box, Steve.
Yeah, okay.
I was just going to say, because many people do suffer with that, don't they? With digestive issues, and the IBS is a big one for that.
Absolutely. Well, I did write my master's degree thesis on irritable bowel syndrome, so I wrote about 20,000 words on it. At that time, this was in the mid-noughties. So I think at that time, about 24% of all referrals to a gastroenterologist end up with diagnosis of IBS.
Right. And not necessarily being IBS. Is that what you're saying?
When they'd run out of everything else, they just said they've got IBS.
Right. Okay.
So to the extent it's a functional disease rather than a structural disease. So therefore, there's no cellular changes, unlike conditions such as celiac disease, for sake of argument.
Right. Okay. So if somebody is thinking of coming to see yourself just for the Chinese herbal side, Steve, what would they expect to, as a session, what would they expect to receive from you?
Going slightly off topic, as I practice TCM, most people who come tend to have acupuncture as well. It's not obligatory. You don't have to have acupuncture if you don't want. However, it is included in the price. So it's not any cheaper if you don't.
What would someone expect when they came to you and they said, no acupuncture, thank you. Don't get me near any needles. I just want the Chinese herbs, Steve.
Right. So for Chinese herbs, basically speaking, so when people come for a consultation, they're usually with us about an hour on first visit. I go through, take their full case history, do a few tests, look at their tongue, of course, feel their pulse, of course, their blood pressure, these kind of things. When we've taken the case history, I explain to the patient what they may have in a Chinese medicine diagnostical sense. Maybe even I might even stray into a Western medicine diagnosis as well. So therefore, every patient gets their piece of paper, which on it has the words at the top: regularity of life is by far and away the most important thing for wellness and for health and for ease, is to have a regular life pattern. Going to bed at a similar time, getting up at a similar time, exercising at a similar time, going to the bathroom at a similar time, etc., etc. Apart from that, sensible physical exercise is pretty essential to maintain wellness, as is eating the correct food for the individual and doing abdominal breathing. So whether you want to call it praying or meditating, that kind of breathing technique, particularly with that kind of mental awareness type,
bit of mindfulness, isn't it?
Mindfulness, precisely, is pretty essential as well. In China, they used to say that for 40% of all people that came to hospital, you didn't need to give them herbs, you just change the diet. Now, that obviously means that for 60% of people, you do need to give them herbs and change the diet.
And explain more about Tao for those that don't understand what Tao is.
How long have you got?
The potted version.
There's a book called the Tao Te Ching, which means the way of virtue. This was written by Lao Tzu. This was written about 800,000 years BC. So, for instance, expressions like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one small step come from the Tao Te Ching.
Right.
Plan what is difficult while it's still easy comes from the Tao Te Ching. He who has learning increases daily. He who has Tao decreases daily. They decrease and decrease until at last they arrive at non-action. In non-action, nothing remains not done, right? This is called Wu Wei in Chinese. So it doesn't mean you're sitting around on your sofa smoking dope and doing nothing. It means that Wu Wei means non-action. So therefore, if you live in harmony with Tao, with your personal higher Godhead, the right things happen. There's a very good book called The Tao of Pooh, as in Winnie the Pooh, by Benjamin Hoff, which I can highly recommend if you have any interest at all in Taoism or any kind of, Eastern mysticism per se. Essential reading. It explains Taoism through the medium of Winnie the Pooh. So most people think Winnie the Pooh is a bit of a stupid fat bear that kind of bumbles around and has a nice time. That's Taoism. You bumble around, you have a nice time, and everything's great.
However, and you're lovely to everybody.
And everyone's lovely to you.
And everyone's lovely to you. Yeah.
The problem is you have to get the bumbling bit right first.
Yeah, because you're all love. We've kind of gone off topic, but yeah, that's going to be a great resource. So going back to our Chinese herbs, can you explain more about how they work or why they work, or and the difference between Western and Chinese herbs as well?
Sure. Okay. First of all, let's have the difference. There isn't a difference. Plants are plants are plants. Plants are, of course, universal. Plants are the first form of medicines that the human species used. There are herbals that go back to the Code of Hammurabi rabbis back 1700 BC. There's other texts from China, from India, and from Assyria, which have about that kind of, 1500 to 2000 years BC is kind of when the books were first starting to be, although they're the ones that are still surviving. Right. So, for instance, in the West, humoral medicine held sway for about 1500 years. So therefore, this is the medicine of Galen and Hippocrates. Galen was actually a personal physician for, I think, 4 or 6 Roman emperors. This is, where you get things like melancholic, phlegmatic, sanguine, etc., characterizations. You have the 4 elements. You have earth, air, fire, and water, etc., etc. This understanding held sway in the West until about Harvey, so that's what, 17th century. This explained herbs in whether they were warm or cold or hot or cool and their natures. Chinese herbal medicine, the whole of Chinese life for the last 3,000 years is based on the concept of yin and yang. Yin means the shady side of a hill. Yang means the sunny side of the hill. That's what the characters mean. So they're opposites, hot and cold, day and night, male and female, but they're not good and bad. There's no value judgment. So therefore, this underpins the whole of Chinese life. The first mention of yin and yang within the I Ching, which is the Book of Changes, which is about 800 to 1000 BC. The ultimate void creates yin and yang. Yin and yang, due to the energetic tension between themselves, create qi, and because of that, the universe manifests. So therefore, anything in the universe is a sort of qi. The character for qi is a combination of the character for the breeze, or vapor, or steam, combined with the character for rice. So it means that qi is as solid as rice, which obviously is a staple diet of all Chinese people, but it's as invisible as the breeze or air. So it's energy and matter at the same time. And that is the core of traditional Chinese medicine, which underpins acupuncture, herbal medicine, diet therapy, massage, and Qigong. Traditional Chinese medicine is based on something that you can't see, you can't measure, and is invisible.
I love that. I've never heard that explanation before. Perfect.
Interestingly, when I was being educated, I was told that approximately 50% of all pharmaceutical drugs originate from plants, i.e. if they weren't directly extracted from a plant like digoxin from foxgloves, then the plant was used as a template for them to synthetically create the drugs, which were based on an original molecule from plant or a plant. So with Chinese herbal medicine, as I said, you learn the individual herbs. So you learn things like ginseng, or you learn things like honeysuckle, or you learn things like mint, or this kind of thing. And then they're created into formulas for specific diagnoses. Right, so originally speaking, Chinese herbal medicine was bits of bark, twigs, leaves, flowers, you boil them up. That's the easiest way. The easiest way is to eat the plant. However, obviously with formulas with more than one plant in, you boil them up and you basically drink the tea. So it's a water-based decoction extraction. Decoction means you basically boil it, and infusion means you basically just kind of pour boiling water and let it infuse like making tea. So in the modern day and age, most people don't particularly want to spend anything up to 40 minutes every night boiling up their medicine. So therefore, the form of the medicines that I use personally, I do have tinctures, which are an alcoholic extract of herbs, which means that you just take a teaspoonful 3 times a day with a bit of water. We have patent pills. So harping back to what we were saying previously about diagnoses such as liver qi stagnation, which basically is kind of stress, PMT type thing, or kidney yin deficiency, which is often diseases such as diabetes, these kind of conditions. there's a set formula. So a lot of the times I will give people a pill if they are, for the sake of argument, diagnosed with kidney yin deficiency, and I'll give them a specific medicine to treat them. I also use instant freeze-dried Chinese powders. Now, these came out predominantly from Taiwan originally, I believe, and these were for people that want to take traditional medicine but didn't want to spend 40 minutes every day boiling it up. So this is a bit like instant coffee. So basically, they decoct the herbs, they spray them on starch, they freeze-dry them and concentrate them, and therefore taking a spoonful of the powder, I think it's 5 to 1. So a gram of the powder is equivalent to 5 grams of the herbs, dried herb.
Okay.
So that's much more convenient. You can have the best medicine in the world, but if the person doesn't take it, it doesn't work.
Doesn't work in the cupboard, does it? No.
Proximity talks don't work. You have to actually get down to it and actually take it.
Yeah. Fabulous. Okay, so we're going to come to our last question, Steve. I'm going to ask you what your 3 top tips for our audience is, please. And really just to give a brief overview of what you've told us so far, that I mean, personally, I think herbs are absolutely wonderful. They're so natural. So although they might be slower at working than, normal medicine, you're still going to get the results, but you're not going to have the side effects from those herbs. So they're very safe. And if you go to see the Chinese herbal medicine therapist, then you might get an overall thing like Steve was talking about. It's a combination of Chinese herbs, acupuncture, qigong, and Tui Na. So you're going to get a combination of those things, but it's all very much personalized to your condition at that point in time. And presumably, Steve, when people come back then to see you again, you reassess with the pulse, the tongue, and all of those things and questions, right?
Okay. Yeah, every time.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to pass back to you for your 3 top tips.
Okay, well, just before we get on to top tips, as you so accurately said, drugs suppress your symptoms. Suppressing your symptoms is precisely the right thing to do at certain times in your life. If you've been hit by a bus, you don't want to see a herbalist. You want to see a paramedic. And you want the paramedic to inject you with things like adrenaline and dimorphin and these kind of things so that you can go to hospital and have fantastic surgery, and hopefully that will keep you alive, where seeing a herbalist certainly probably wouldn't. So therefore, my opinion is that the orthodox medicine is a fantastic thing. My only slight comment is that if you look in your toolkit of what you can do to help people, and all you've got is Western medicine, that's what you're going to use. If you look in your toolkit, you've got Western medicine and Chinese medicine and osteopathy and chiropractic and diet therapy and all the other broader therapies, then you've got a much broader potential base to interact with the individual with, and therefore you're more likely to find something that is going to be specifically beneficial for them. The idea that medicine's medicine, nothing else is medicine, is ridiculously absurd, totally arrogant, and unbelievably naive. Right, so my top 3 tips: eat warm cooked food. Tip number 1. So therefore, in Chinese medicine, your spleen and stomach, when they use words like spleen, don't be led under the false impression of thinking that it is the same functional organ as Western medicine calls the spleen. So therefore, in a Chinese medicine sense, your spleen is responsible for transforming and transporting, right? Okay. So your spleen transforms the food you eat into the energy that you need. Your spleen also transforms fluid and water around your body, right? So therefore, there's an expression in Chinese that your spleen loathes damp and your stomach loathes cold. So if you eat raw food or uncooked food, you'll become qi deficient. So that's the first point. Second thing, as we mentioned previously, read my book. So that's the second thing. Eat warm cooked food, get my book, and borrowing something slightly from Ayurvedic medicine, be happy. Happiness is the same. In Ayurveda, the word for happiness apparently is the same as the word for health, and the word for unhappiness is the same as the word for disease. So be at ease, be well. Don't become diseased. When you're diseased, you're not at ease. When you're not at ease, you get symptoms, and they affect your mind, your body, and your emotions. Therefore, you need to react on a mental, emotional, and physical level to restore health, balance, and get back to being better than you were before, because you never go back, you can only go forwards. So yeah, those are my 3 main tips. Read the book, eat warm cooked food, and as Epicurus would say, enjoy life.
Live like Pooh Bear.
Absolutely.
Live love.
Yeah. Bumble around and be happy.
Fantastic, Steve. That's brilliant. And I'm sure our audience have gained a ton more of information than they anticipated at the start of this interview. I know that I have. All of the links will be in the description box below. So if you want to get in touch with Steve, which I highly recommend because herbs are absolutely amazing, find out if they're going to be the resource that you need to help with you condition that you have. And of course, there'll be another interview coming up on screen. And if you want to find out about any other therapies, then you can go there and do that. I shall see you over there. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you for joining us. And thank you so much for watching. Take care and bye for now.